algorithm?
I have no idea.
You throw in a Boolean cube.
Oh my gosh. So bad, it's great.
So bad. But
Yeah.
we have so few nerd jokes that we have to hold on to the ones that make us even grow and laugh.
We do.
Hey, I think we're live on the internet.
All
You
right.
excited for this?
Yes, I am. I've got Oreos and everything ready. Stand by. I'm good.
Welcome. Thank you, lovely, beautiful humans who are coming to us today from around the world in your most comfortable pajamas. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce our guest today, the myth and the legend who chopped away 2/3 of an e-commerce website, a little controversial move there, and increased the organic sessions by 10% and overall conversions by 18, the indomitable Mr. Luke Carthy. Thank you for joining us.
What an intro, eh? It's pretty special, that, Jamie. Thank you very much.
We couldn't get the music rights for Jay-Z, so I got to hype you up.
Brilliant. Yeah, thanks for having me, man. I can't wait to chew into this stuff. Got lots of stuff to talk about.
Always do. I feel like every time you have a session, no matter how long it is, there's always just like, but wait, no. And you could just keep going. For those of us joining today, a couple of housekeeping notes. There's a Q&A box at the bottom. Luke is going to give you 1,001 brilliant little ideas. If you have questions, please throw them in that box. We're going to do a whole Q&A session at the end when we wrap up. You're also going to get a short survey about this webinar. Tell us what you liked, what you didn't like. We'll sort it all out for you. This will be available on demand later, and we'll also have a write-up of the webinar available. And with that, I would love to pass this over to the main event today as we talk about e-commerce, SEO, and conversions. Take it away, Luke.
Awesome. Two of my absolute favorite things, right? So yeah, we've got some stuff to chew through, right? We've got the conversion strategies, SEO, like it's the perfect blend of both things. And I actually was just at a conference this week talking about that perfection of sweet spot between acquisition and optimizing for e-commerce revenue. But also, although a lot of the stuff that myself and Jamie are going to chew through today is e-commerce centric, doesn't have to be just e-commerce, right? There's loads of things, whether you're lead gen, whether you're kind of, online bookings, whether you're a listing site, whatever it is, these kind of principles apply. But we're kind of framing it in the sense of e-commerce, right? So don't alienate yourself if you're not necessarily in e-commerce. These can still work for, still lots of things you can take away from this.
Optimization and conversion are universal across the web, right?
Absolutely.
Let's dive into our first bit. Let's talk about balancing SEO and conversions, or having our cake and eating it too.
Yeah, this is probably where we spend as SEOs, or whether you're new to the world of SEO or you're kind of a veteran and been in it for quite a few years. This will always be the battle in the middle, right, between experience and what good organic looks like. And yeah, in a perfect world, everything would be holistic, everyone would shake hands and everything would be gorgeous and just work. But the reality is there's a lot of different things that kind of jump into this and make things a little bit more tricky. I think a perfect example, and I'm going to jump into the deep end on this, is kind of like faceted navigation is one, right?
Oh, yeah, that's a beast.
It's an absolute beast in the sense of, if you think about it from a user perspective for a moment, there's a balance. Too many filters can be overwhelming. Not enough filters can be underwhelming. But, I guess when you think about user experience, and if we put ourselves in the situation of, say, a marketplace or a big retailer across lots of different departments, you're going to have lots of filters. The obvious color, size, shape, cut, finish, depending on what it is, and then some more of your vertical specific filters as well. And these are great for user experience. These are incredible. They help people to find what they want, what they need, to refine, all of that good stuff. But the fallout from that is kind of like, well, this is great, but now we have to kind of potentially, depending on the tech stack and everything else, clean up, hundreds of thousands, maybe millions or even bigger numbers of kind of URLs and how to manage that, right? So
they breed like bunnies. You give a couple sets of filters together. Woof.
They absolutely do. They absolutely do. And there is, I mean, I think maybe it makes sense actually to start this from the off and say, build it for the user and engineer it for search engines, right? So like, I think sometimes I've done it. I think a lot of SEOs in the game, whether you've been in it for a while or you just started, will always think about trying to almost reverse engineer how Google's thinking. The best way to approach this stuff
is just copy Amazon, right?
Exactly. Yeah, just copy Amazon, man.
That's all.
And then we all just go home, right? But like, yeah, just do what the user wants, create a great experience, and then almost reverse engineer that experience to create good, clean, smart, fast experiences that of course complement SEO as well, right?
So it sounds like it's curating what not only is available, but what is indexable. For somebody who's never gone down that rabbit hole, how would they learn what the user wants?
All right. So this is actually a heck of a lot more simple than what, this is either my simple brain speaking out loud, or it's kind of taking away from some of the complexity of how people go about this. But just search for it, man. Just literally go to Google or your favorite flavor of search engine and just search for things and see what the intent is. And what I mean by that is, let's say you're a retailer that sells running shoes, right? If you search for running shoes as a broad term, what is it you're seeing? What is it you're seeing in the results? Are you seeing knowledge graph stuff? Are you seeing kind of products? Are you seeing category URLs in the search? Moving the ads to one side for a second, what is Google trying to do to satisfy that query, right? And then it's just a case of understanding, right, that is the intent for this. That is the kind of experience that Google is serving. How can I build that on my particular website? Now, I think a really good example of that is if you are a sports retailer and running shoes is just a category or something that you operate in, you might have 50, 100, 200 different types of running shoes spanning, men's, women's, maybe even children's, or really kind of specific edge case, super expensive.
Sizes, widths.
Sizes,
yeah.
Right? There's a very slim chance that you showing a list of 150, 200 products is going to help anyone, right? It's probably not going to help anyone.
That's so frustrating when I want to buy shoes and I really love a pair, but they're not in my size. So I use that size filter all the time.
Right. But like, maybe the experience that you should look at, and again, see what the search experience is to help the user find what they want. So running shoes, great, broad, top level. I've got no idea who you are, what you want to spend.
Do you even have feet?
Right, exactly. So like, allow people to kind of build merchandised experiences. Like, do you want unisex shoes? One's for men, one for women, advanced, beginners. Are you working to a budget? Have you got particular brands that you want to look through? And there's one brand actually that I'll call out that does this really, really well in merchandising, and it's Boots. There's two actually. Boots is in the healthcare vertical, boots.com. It's a UK healthcare brand. And the other one is an electrical retailing brand in the UK here called AO, so appliances online, AO.com. They just do this incredible hand-holding experience of broad, top level. So things like washing machine, very broad, thousands of products in there.
Oh, yeah.
All the way down to specific sizes, brands, budgets, features, integrated or freestanding, all of that sort of good stuff. And that is glorious to kind of build that from a user experience perspective, but also from an SEO perspective, it's fantastic because from your internal linking, right, and all your merchandising and how you stack the pages, it works wonderfully as well. But that is often a much better experience than just slapping a list of 300, 400, 500 products in front of somebody, right?
Absolutely. And we can balance it too, where you can have lists of products, but let's call out those more curated lists before we start blasting out products, So you've described someone who does something really well. I would love to hear a horror story. All right,
a horror story. Yeah, actually, so I have a good one. And this is quite an old one, actually. And I'm going to put my hand on this. This is a mistake that I actually made. So the reason why I like to talk about this particular story is because we can all make mistakes. And as much as I'm preaching all of the stuff now, we've all got to make one. Hopefully not as catastrophic as this, but we all have to do it.
What's that old digital adage? It's not yours until you break it.
Right. I like that. I'm going to write that one down. But this was probably like maybe 2 or 3 years into my SEO career. And as always, a migration was at the center of this, an e-commerce migration specifically. And what I didn't do is take into account at the point of migration, I had all the lists and everything else made. I didn't take into account how the website would handle parameters, fragments, and all of those kind of really granular specific variants of URLs, right? So as you do, you're up about 2 a.m. in the morning, you're doing the migration, you're biting your nails, everyone's nervous. And I think it's a clean bill of health, right? So a couple of days pass, and I'm thinking revenue's tanking, man. Like revenue is in trouble. What is going on here? And naturally, what you always do is probably go for the most technical thing first. You start looking at the server, site speed, can people add to basket, you know, all of that kind of stuff. And I realized actually that maybe probably as a ballpark number, 60% of all the URLs as a result of all those parameters weren't redirecting anywhere.
Oh no, the redirect rules didn't consider the parameters.
Right. So
I've had that one too. Yep, shared pain, my friend.
And then it gets a little bit worse because the 404 page was not registering a 404 status code, right? It was registering as a 200. So you can imagine how long it took to find this problem. My point here is, what is the kind of lesson from this? Always make sure your 404 page works. Like, just make sure it works. And as a little kind of tack onto that, there's a really good tip I'll give you, which is in Google Analytics, you can use the page title, whether that's GA4 or UA. You can use the page title to create a segment or create a report. Now, if you're lucky enough, most websites typically have a static page title for a 404. So you can use that, and then you have a real-time 404 report by actual number of sessions rather than just hits, and a finger on the pulse when you're doing a migration. And that is, for me, the one thing I have to have before I even think about a migration, because that allows me to have real-time data as to exactly what's going on and whether there's any 404s I need to fix. But yeah, I learned that the hard way, man.
That real-time insight sounds so critical, especially in migrations, and when how you find out is that drop in dollars. So there's one last slice of cake that I want to get here. And we know that product reviews have a ranking factor, and they have a new set of standards behind them that rolled out pretty recently. But let's talk about product descriptions and product reviews. How do we put that info on there in a way that balances our conversions and our optimization?
All right, so product descriptions, product reviews. So we'll talk about product descriptions real quick for a moment. So for me, product descriptions are probably one of the most debated, I guess, investments of work, if you like, in the space of e-commerce, because if you've got 1,000 products, that is potentially 1,000 bits of work you've got to do. And the age-old question I hear is there any point in doing them? And additionally, should I just copy and paste them from somewhere else? Right? Now, there's an SEO answer to this, and there's a CRO answer to this. So this is a perfect candidate for this. The SEO answer is, it really depends on where you operate, right? So if you're a reseller, creating unique content is probably going to help you a little bit more. But equally, from a CRO perspective, it's not going to help you all that much. So let's say, for example, again, you sell Samsung TVs, and they're available everywhere. If you want to read about the TVs, you've got the Samsung website, you've got all the reviews, everything online talks about them, YouTube, everything else, right? So you going away and sweating over creating really quite beautiful, personalized and unique content for that is great for SEO, potentially, but doesn't really help you a fat lot in terms of conversion, because you're end of funnel, right? People have already done the research before they think about buying that product from you. That completely flips around when you think about products that maybe you manufacture. So let's say you sell your own range of fragrance, right? There's no one else who's going to be able to talk about that.
Oh, product. The nerd.
Right, exactly. So you have to invest in descriptions in those cases, but actually the SEO return is slightly slimmer, because you've got other pages on the site that might be better for those things, whether that's, again, merchandise pages, your homepage, other kind of parts of the site. So it's a horrible kind of it depends answer. But the way I like to look at it is investing all of that time going to have a profound impact to how much revenue you make? If the answer is no, then for me, it's actually just do the basics and then refine afterwards. If the answer is yes, then absolutely go to town on descriptions, but it really depends on what environments you play in.
You got to know your own data and your own site. There's never a one size fits all. There's a reason it depends haunts our dreams.
Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah.
Can we talk about this next bit? Because it's exciting and very relevant. We're about to be into Q3, and this is pretty high value to the folks who've joined us today. They want to know about seasonal testing and a larger scale. There's a state of the market. Do we stick to the norms here?
All right. No.
Next slide.
Yeah, there's great stuff that Jamie and I have spoke about actually just before we went live on this. The kind of simple answer is no, but it's no for two reasons, right? Even if the data wasn't here that we're about to kind of jump into, the answer should always be no, because if the answer is yes, you breed complacency, right? There's the assumption that every year you're going to have hay fever at the same time. There's the assumption that certain trends and behaviors will happen every year because they've been that way for the last 5 years.
Yeah.
When you kind of get complacent, growth doesn't happen. You get caught up by surprise. Revenue starts to erode. You lose out to competitors, and those sort of things, right? So, yeah, there's some profound stuff. I'm assuming that's on your next slide for us, Jamie, and we can kind of talk around.
I mean, it is absolutely going to come up here, but I want to call back to this whole, like, you get complacent and you get presumptive about your audiences. I follow a subreddit that's our Halloween, and these are folks who are all year round getting ready and excited for Halloween. These are relatively new folks on there, and we've seen like different patterns where something was normally very seasonal, and now it's growing to have a longer term over the calendar year. But for those that don't, for those things like back to school, where it's a 3-month span, what do you do with that page when it's not useful?
All right. So I guess to use a specific example, right? So yeah, back to school, Black Friday, Christmas, whatever that kind of pillar in the calendar is in your particular vertical. My opinion is on this, keep it live all year round. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is because you can use that as a barometer for interest and demand throughout the year. So if it gets, back to school, actually this year, I have a feeling will be, at least in the UK, I think it will be later. And the reason why I think the heat wave is really kind of got people to wake up and thought, hold on a minute, maybe I now need shorts for my son or skirts for my daughter into September, where previously I would have bought trousers and jumpers, right? So like little things like that. Me as a parent, that's kind of where I'm thinking. But keeping those pages up all year round allows you to gauge annual interest. And also, people don't just buy school uniform once a year, right? That's kind of like when everybody buys it, but everyone knows kids are ruthless. Things get ripped, kids grow, people lose things. So yeah, keep it live all year round.
Tiny chaotic humans.
Yeah, exactly, right? On top of that, even if the campaign you're running is gone, so let's say Black Friday, right? You might have run it for a month if you're one of those retailers who turns Black Friday into like a whole month. But the other 9, 10, 11 months of the year, allow people to land on the page and just give them an Easter egg, right? Whether that's a free discount.
An Easter egg.
Yeah, an Easter egg. Do something special.
Hey, Home Depot, can you do this with a 12-foot skeleton? I know you're keeping it live to see how many of us want it because you sold out last year. Give me that coupon.
Exactly. So whether that's a coupon, whether that is worst case, it's lead gen, right? It's like Black Friday's not here yet, but if you sign up for this, we'll kind of keep you posted and you'll know before everybody else, but keep it live all year round. If you can't do that for reasons where you've got a fight in terms of bureaucracy in the business, or there's a tech stack limitation, whatever it is, if you're going to redirect it, cool, but just make sure you use the same URLs every year.
Keep them evergreen, yeah.
Keep them evergreen, yeah.
I saw a great strategy where, the seasonal promo page wasn't live, but they actually just highlighted promos that were live. Thought that was pretty great.
Smart.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Please
yeah,
still
yeah.
give me that coupon code though.
Absolutely. Last thing to tack onto the back of that, if you are a retailer that doesn't partake in a particular calendar event that everyone's doing, so Black Friday is perfect. I forget the brand now, but there was an apparel brand that believes purely in ethical fashion rather than kind of fast fashion. So sustainable, ethical clothing.
Yeah.
And what they did is they built a Black Friday landing page and just used that as almost like a signboard to say, here's the reasons why our brand doesn't support Black Friday.
REI does that.
Yeah. Brilliant. I think it's brilliant.
I love it. They do. Actually, they give all the employees the day off. They're like, go outside, go on a hike. And I think that is a beautiful counterpoint to a lot of consumers to culture. And it's great because it supports that brand's persona, what we associate them with. It's useful, even though they don't curate to it, they still use that opportunity to show what their values are.
And they still capture the traffic, right? So if you search a brand name on Black Friday, okay, the landing page doesn't have the deals on, but actually you're still capturing that traffic. And maybe as a result, people buy from you anyway, because they respect the message and understand the kind of brand principles you're taking. So yeah, it can work really well.
All right, we've got to talk about some lovely, exciting things. If someone from Home Depot is on, send me a coupon for the skeleton. But now we kind of have to get to something a little bit more tantalizing and concerning as we have this. Well, we're not going to scaremonger. We're going to be realistic people and assess that there are things that can happen and how we would deal with them. You ready for me to unveil this next one?
Yes, go for it.
All right.
All right. So for context, I was at HeroConf yesterday. Tuesday.
Time is elastic.
Tuesday, yeah. And I spoke to a gentleman called Ian, who is a gentleman who works in Google on one of the engineering teams, and he blew my mind with this particular slide. So I'm going to try and paraphrase a little bit here, but what Ian was saying is the fact that for the first time, as long as we can remember, from 2004, as you can see here, up until recently, I think this is probably early 20, maybe mid 2021, best has superseded cheap. Like everyone looks for the best thing, and then I guess you kind of put your budget in there and come to a compromise between what is cheap and what is best. But everyone searches for best, and cheap has been declining, right? So if you jump to the next slide, Jamie, this is profound. Over the last 18 months, a huge flip has happened where best is now in decline and cheap has grown by 4x.
That's mind-blowing.
It's insane, right? When you think about for the last decade plus, it's and this literally, I think, is the epitome of why you can't get complacent, sorry, because you just assume that best is a safe bet. Don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to say best is falling off the face of the earth, but it's very clear to see here that cheap is back again, and it's been a long time since we've been here, you know.
I mean, that's near the 100th. Like, this is the highest search query trend for cheap we've ever seen. Yeah,
and we can all speculate as to why. We've all got our own personal reasons and struggles, right? Whether it's the cost of fuel wherever you are in the world, whether it's just the rate of inflation with the kind of, conflicts and things that are going on in the world. All of these things are probably contributing factors. But the point here is whether you operate in the luxury space, whether you operate in the kind of FMCG, cheap and cheerful, fast fashion space, whatever it is, this is likely to have an impact on the amount of money that potential customers want to spend, and also their prioritization of what they address when they're looking at buying something.
So they could even change merchandising strategies.
Yeah, it could. I mean, again, it's all kind of speculation. None of this is based upon real data, but well, besides this slide. But my thinking here is
there's a collective nervousness, and it's being reflected in our queries.
Yeah, and I think this is probably going to have an impact on our, Black Friday campaigns, on our kind of Halloween, anything that's in kind of Q4, fireworks, independence, all that kind of stuff is. I just think it's going to have a tweak. And I guess depending on the vertical you're in, depends on how much of this is going to impact you. But it's definitely something to think about and test, as always, test and pay attention to in your respective verticals and so on.
So what do we do? Do we stay the course? Because most folks out there, they've been optimizing, for best forever. Can they recycle that content? Can they pivot that content? Is it time to make all new content?
Yeah, I think, honestly, I think you've probably got two profoundly different audiences here. I just think you're now in a situation where you have an opportunity to target people that are best, and they're almost becoming niche by looking again at this data. So best is now a smaller audience. And as we know, with a smaller audience, you get a higher concentration of dedicated people who are more dedicated to that particular cause. And
brand loyalty is going to matter here too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Brand loyalty, retention. Cheap is probably going to break out a new level of kind of, potential buyers, but then also, cheaper from a consumer perspective is the benefit. But when you think about the cost, inflation, squish on delivery fees and everything else, profitability, that is a challenge for retailers, for brands, right? So
yeah,
this is where CRO now actually is probably more important than it has been before, because if you're selling to a best customer, you've probably got a higher margin, you may have a higher LTV, you might have better retention. If someone is looking for cheap, typically they are going to let go of brand and prioritize a cheaper option over a better option. So maybe thinking about actually how you convert more effectively, how you can think about getting people to stick and be more receptive to other channels that you haven't got to pay for. So there's a lot of things that flex here, but my point here is complacency is every year it's a risk, but I think with the whole market and the industry and everything, the way that things are going, this is really going to be interesting to see how it plays out,
So what I'm taking away from this is we can't copy and paste the content from last year, and maybe a new style of copy where we have product comparisons of good, better, best might be useful on a product detail page, but it's going to depend on your data points and your trends. And you've got to really be tapped into that data set to make informed decisions to be most effective as we come into this Q3.
Yeah. The last thing I'll mention on this is normally when we start to see things in Google Trends, they will eventually start to trickle through to our own personal site data. So site search queries, probably even like filter choices in terms of price and that sort of thing. So just pay particular attention to your own site search and see if you're seeing something similar in your own verticals and on your own sites, right?
You've talked about this before. This is the umbrella of optimization where we have site search and our indicators. Yeah? Yeah,
100%. This is, site search is literally the voice of the people without, that for me is where I start. It's how people are searching based upon demand, based upon struggles, based upon the fact that they can't find something somewhere else. There's a lot of different reasons why people will search, right? Sometimes it's just sheer laziness and it's right in front of them, but I just want to search for it.
I always love the random queries that you find in site search. Like go in there and just see how many times people search for Google in your site search. It's amazing.
It happened. And then there's kind of like a thing where if people are doing that, then maybe there's a UX thing to look at, which is there might be a cross-pollination, or you just have an older demographic. You've got a handful of people who aren't necessarily mobile savvy. But again, if you've got a lot of people doing that, that's interesting. I think one of the good example on that I'll just quickly touch on is if you are a brand that only sells one brand and you have people searching for that one specific brand, your branding isn't clear. And I've seen that happen before, right? That's always an interesting one.
All right, can I ask you just one last question here when it comes to our seasonal testing? So it's great to run campaigns, but I personally am tired of getting like niche campaigns for hay fever ads when I don't have hay fever. Like how would a CRO address this?
Yeah, all right, I love this game. This is probably one of these times where I lose some of my, I kind of care a little bit less about SEO, or I'm happy to sacrifice some of that in benefit for a better personalized experience. Because as we know, personalization and organic performance don't really play very well together, right? it creates conflict and complexity, especially when you're talking about geographic and all this sort of good stuff. But if we talk specifically about user experience here, it's a case of understanding your user, right? And what I mean by that is, it sounds really cliche, but
yeah.
What have they clicked? What have they searched for? What have they browsed? What have they bought before? What have they not bought before, and use that? So the perfect example you've used, right? Hay fever for a pharmaceutical retailer, one of which is a client of mine. Maybe that is the #1 selling product between February and probably August, peaking in sort of July. But that doesn't mean, to your point, Jamie, that just because it's the most popular selling products, that everyone who visits the homepage is going to want that thing. So by creating these personalized silos, and they don't have to be really complicated, you could just have a generic kind of catch-all for everyone, and that also goes to your search engines. And then you kind of have, oh, this person's into healthcare. Oh, this person's into nutrition. Oh, this person's got children, right? And you kind of create a stack of personas. So rather than seeing allergy tablets everywhere, you actually see, well, you're into, say, multivitamins and kind of, you know, whether it's kind of, for me personally, it's like anything I can do to make myself smarter by taking more fish oils and things like that. So that'll be where I'm at. But by creating those experiences, you kind of accommodate for your particular user, rather than a broad kind of nation. There's one other example I'll give that I think works really well and gets you to properly think, and that's car parts. And I'm a massive petrol head, right? So everybody needs an oil filter if you're doing an oil service, but no two people.
Wait, cars take oil?
Yeah. Right. Yes, Jamie. They absolutely. Well, I don't know. If it's a Tesla, you know, so maybe in a year from now, that could be a serious question. But like, there's so many different variables for, you know, cars, manufacturers, certain parts, years, makes, manufacturer registrations, countries, that just showing a generic banner for oil filter on the homepage is not going to cut it. And I think anyone in that kind of granular, super specific space.
Oh, yeah. Now you're talking about segmenting based on the type of vehicle they have or what you can guesstimate to be their vehicle. Y'all, if you have questions, there is a Q&A box at the bottom. This is your time to ask the expert, because if there is anything that we took away from the Search on conference this year, it's that no one knows how to handle product variations. This guy does. Get your questions in. Tell me more about cars. How do you say that word?
All right. So, I guess, so for me, I guess the biggest challenge is, so that's your conversion experience, right? That's your CRO, that's your kind of think about the user. And then the search engines kind of squad and department are kind of crying a little bit because things are slowing down. You know, you've kind of got potentially fragmented user journeys where like your internal links change depending on where you click and so on. So there's a couple of things to talk about here. And I'm going to be quite controversial here. My first point is, so what? Right? If you're making more money, who cares? Right? Like, who's your ultimate stakeholder here? Is it Google or is it the shareholders? Is it? So this is kind of comes back to the point of right back at the beginning when you introduced me about removing 2/3 of a website, but you're making more money. So just because you're getting less traffic, like, don't see that as a bad thing. This is a massive edge case, by the way. I'm not saying this is like the way to take a look at it, but my point still stands in that more traffic is a separate issue from profitability, revenue conversion.
Qualified traffic and traffic are two things. One is a subset of the other.
Absolutely. And this is also why it's really important to have a vanilla experience, which is kind of goes to anonymous visitors, search engines, right? Anyone who's never been to the site before, because they will have a, what's the opposite of personalized? A non-personalized, unpersonalized experience, which everybody will go default
experience.
Perfect.
All right. Can we talk about how to deploy that kind of, because we're getting into some gritty details here, and I would love to chat about how do we deploy these campaigns successfully when we've got vanilla default and then rocky road Tesla drivers. And
yeah, it's crazy, right? It is crazy. So a lot of experiences that I see are driven by a handful of things, right? Cookies being one. Another thing is kind of weird and wonderful URLs that really shouldn't be part of your kind of user journey and SEO kind of side of things. So the first kind of point to mention is if you're leveraging cookies, Jamie, you might be able to correct me on this, but if you're leveraging cookies, as far as we understand today, cookies aren't an issue when we think about crawlers, right?
Crawlers are stateless. They're not
Right.
going to accept your cookies.
So that is one thing, because a lot of personalization platforms rely heavily on cookies and other bits and pieces as well, like signing in and stuff like that. But you know, cookies are predominantly how they function. So ultimately, your search engine will behave as if you were incognito. That's how I kind of explain it to clients, right? And that's why it's really important to have your default baseline, which is your perfect fabrication of internal links based upon how you want a normal user who's never been to your site before to experience that environment. Separately to that, and once we've kind of worked out who they are, once you've got your personalization popping, all that sort of good stuff, that is a different issue. But you still have to have some kudos. So my thinking here is there might be some canonical things that you need to do just to be sure, and also some robots.txt stuff you might want to throw in there if you've got weird kind of third-party parameters kind of firing in and that sort of good stuff. But I think more important than anything else is whenever you're looking at SEO, don't go on this, don't visit the website for the 80th time this week because you've been looking at it all the time, because that's not the site search engines are going to see. Incognito this stuff. Have yourself a completely independent browser that you clear every time and use that.
A testing profile is great. You just flush everything out. Keep that dedicated entirely separate. Those of you who are doing A/B tests and want to know how Google wants you to do them, there's actually finally documentation in Google Search Central under the advanced section about how to properly do A/B tests. And spoiler alert, it is to have 2 versions server side, because I have a bone to pick with some CROs and those blocking pixels that want to be directly above the opening head tag. Whew. Let's talk about that one, because the technical implementation here impacts everyone. If you're running an A/B test and your conversion rate before the test was twice what it is on the control of the test, your A/B testing platform is mucking up everyone's Christmas.
Very true. I've learned something today because I did not know that. So well, I've learned some stuff. But yeah, I think that's a really good point. Also, on the topic of A/B tests, keep them minimal. And once your testing is done, actually deploy the things, right, to live. Because so many clients, we all do it. We all get super lazy. We leave the test running, and then we just kind of switch to. And
I will find you.
And then we
don't leave pixels on pages where they don't need to be fired. Come on.
Exactly. Make it a permanent state, and don't run too many simultaneous tests because it just creates all sorts of headache and so on.
How can you truly isolate the variable and say what was successful and not when you've got 3 different variables in play?
Yeah, it's really tricky. So A/B tests always come with a pinch of salt because it's never that straightforward. The bigger, the more complex, the more complex the team, the structure, the tool, the people, the touch points, you can never really 100% guarantee that it's just the test, right? There's external things, there's seasonality, there's cheap versus best we just looked at. There's a lot of things. But yeah, it's from an SEO and CRO perspective, the CRO side of me is like, who cares? You're making more money, doesn't really matter. The SEO side of me is be empathetic, sympathetic to overall search performance, right? So, yeah.
All right, do you have one last great tip before we move over to some Q&A?
All right. You're asking me if I have one more tip?
Yes, I've met you in person several times and you have like 20 of them in your back pocket at any given time. Give us one last campaign deployment nugget and we'll start taking these questions.
Here's one that I love, and I never really test it. I always just launch it. Let's say, for example, you are a retailer with a free delivery threshold of $100 or £100. My kind of tip that I give to clients is configure your CMS or your tech stack to accept free delivery at about £98. And the reason why is if you've got a customer, and obviously this is dependent upon if it's profitable and all that sort of things, but assuming it is, it's much better to secure a sale at the 98, 99 pounds, dollars level than it is to lose that sale just over a couple of quid, right? So you still market it on the front end as the threshold that you want to apply, whether it's 100, 500, whatever it is, but you just configure it in your CMS to be a little bit shy of that limit. And that does a couple of things. One, it makes your consumers believe that something is wrong in the best way possible. So like, wow, there's a glitch, there's a bug. I need to, like, almost like the ATM giving you an extra $10. You're just thinking, hold on a minute, I've got to get out of here. Because, you know, so my point is, if that happens, your consumers are delighted, but they also think they've exploited a loophole and need to be quick and buy it now. Additionally, the biggest kind of, one of the biggest reasons for abandonment, as we know, is shipping costs, delivery costs, which are certainly not going down with the kind of cost of fuel and everything else. And we've just seen the slide on best versus cheap. So if there's ever a best time to do this, it's right now. But yeah, winning a £98 sale with free delivery is normally a heck of a lot better than losing it over a $5 because of delivery or whatever. But that can be a really powerful one.
That is great advice. Thank you so much, Luke. Let's go ahead and move into some Q&A. Got some great questions here. One from Rosemary, who asks, hey, who creates the personas? Google based the information they have, Google based on the information they scrape from SEO profiles?
Hold on a minute. Who creates the personas?
Yeah, let's start up with that bit.
Oh, right. Okay. So this was, I think I made a touch point on this when I was talking about personalization, right? Those personas are defined by your personalization platform. That has nothing to do, at least in this context, with Google. So the reason why I say personas is with some personalization platforms, you can go away and create personas based upon rules. So you can kind of have a, almost like a lightweight starting point, which is, this is your everybody, this is your default, this is your audience that's into medicines, this is your audience that's into healthcare, this is your audience that's into fitness. And you might define, say, 3 of those. But then where the personalization platform gets really clever is it will go quite individual, quite on the macro level, and start to refine and develop and refine that and tweak that as you kind of experience more, you've got more history. So when I talk about personas, I'm talking predominantly about the personalization platform that you have here.
Good distinction.
Yeah. But yeah, just to be clear, personalization personas, not anything to do on the SEO or crawling side.
Okay, we've got time for one more question. We just got into so much great conversation, but I've really got into this one too. If you are starting down this road, how do you get buy-in?
All right.
Senior management, other teams. We talked a little bit about conflict between them.
This is a really, really great question. For me, there's a little bit of ask for forgiveness and not permission. But before you get that, your KPIs have to align with what delights your stakeholders, right? So what I mean by this is the point I made earlier about if you're making more money, but you're losing traffic, your stakeholders don't care, right? Your stakeholders don't care about your channels. They don't care about paid search unless there's a reason for them to care about it. And the only reason why they care about it is if they're losing more money or they're making more money. They don't care about anything else. So in most cases, this is a broad generalization. So my point here is you have to speak the same languages as your stakeholders. Now, this might sound really easy, but let me give you a specific
It sounds really easy if you've never started this challenge before.
Exactly. But like one of the best things that I love to do when I'm starting working with clients, and the same thing I did when I started a new role, is asking your superiors, your line managers, whatever that is, what are the things that you look? Where are your fingers on the pulse? What kind of metrics are you interested in? When you've got that information, that's the only way you communicate with that person. Or you start with that kind of the way that they think and the way that they kind of fire, and then you bring in context, but you don't start with number of pages indexed and organic traffic and average SERP and all that sort of stuff if you just don't care. So the biggest kind of example I found in this is to kind of find a problem. And that problem could be crawlability, it could be speed, it could be a number of things. That's the issue you want to fix. Attribute a KPI that they care about to it, whether it's a loss or a positive. So for example, let's say that you've got loads of fragmented parameter URLs going around, it's really impacting your crawlability. That's what you care about as someone in the world of SEO. How does that commercially impact the business to the point where you can convert that, if you like, into metrics that the stakeholder is going to be like, wow, fix it now, or there's a huge opportunity. So for me, it's like loss in organic revenue by doing a bit of basic math and kind of working out some estimates. It could be the amount of money it's costing you in addition to kind of crawl all those URLs. So that could be a case of you just speak to IT and be like, look, can I get an indication as to what this kind of money is? If you're spending 10 grand a year more because you're indexing all these parameter URLs or everything's crawling them and pounding them and affecting your cache and all sorts of good stuff, that's what you want to hear. But your stakeholder wants to hear it's costing you an extra £12,000 a year in hosting, and we should just fix it, right? So that's how you get buy-in. It's like being able to kind of speak two languages, one language which is pure SEO, you can go and geek away and get the finer details, and at the opposite end, you just have to tap into the numbers, the metrics, the performance areas that your actual senior management care about.
Absolutely. You are a pleasure to chat with every single time. I'm still looking forward to it being in real life again. I'm curious where your facial hair will be at that point. Last time I saw you, it was so much shorter. Yeah, I'm looking forward to the full length beard. This is going to be exciting. Where can people follow you and your beard if they want to keep up on the great work you're doing?
All right, so I'm kind of just everywhere. I'm a little bit quiet right now, getting ready for summer holidays, all that sort of stuff. But typically, I'm around on Twitter, Luke Carthy on Twitter. And then, yeah, LinkedIn, I'm kind of active on there as well. Lastly, I have a newsletter, which I've promised myself I'm going to step back into. So I kind of rant about e-commerce stuff, tips and things like that in that. So yeah, if you Google me or you just follow me on Twitter, there's links and stuff to that. But yeah, that's me.
His handle is in the bottom of these slides, easy for you to grab and look for there. If you are interested in some more next steps, we have available resources from the Deepcrawl crew. There's an ebook, How to Make Your Site Performance Multiplier. We've got a blog about implementing strong SEO strategies for 2022. And of course, you can always request a free demo or consultation from our team. My name is Jamie Indigo. I am part of the fantastic Pro Services team, which is just a special group of technical SEOs here at Deepcrawl, ready to help you out. We have a webinar coming August 11th for building SEO strategy from the ground up with Sophie Brennan of Absolute Digital. And of course, thank you all so much for joining us today. We appreciate your time and your energies. We'll look forward to nerding out more soon. And thank you, Mr. Carthy.
Take care, everyone. Thanks for having me again.
Take care.